Hey guys, welcome back to Inchworm Gardens. Today is February 6th, 2021. I'm here in Tennessee, Zone 7. We are about 10 weeks away from our average last frost date for this area. What does that mean? That means seed starting very soon. Some of the warm season veggies like tomatoes and peppers, we don't want to start those too soon, but there are some herbs and some greens that we can start now. And that is exactly what we're going to do today. I'm also going to show you my indoor seed starting setup, talk a little bit about grow lights and how you can start your own seeds indoors if you're not already. And we are going to plant some of our first seeds of the year. That is exciting. Let's get started. Just in case you're not familiar with the zones that I mentioned, so the United States Department of Agriculture broke down the entire US into 13 different growing zones or hardiness zones. And these refer to the average extreme low temperatures that these different areas get. This is helpful information for gardeners and farmers because it'll also tell you when your average last frost date is, the average time that it last freezes in your area. And you use that information for when to plant your plants outside. Because if you put some seedlings in the ground and then it freezes and they die, that's a problem. So it's a little bit of a game of starting your seeds at the right time so when they're ready to go out, it's nice and warm, there's no more frosts coming, and your plants are happy and healthy. So just wanted to define that real quick. Okay, last thing I wanted to mention on this, because this is actually step one of starting seeds, is to find your own zone and your own average last frost date. You find that by simply Googling last frost date and putting your zip code. And it does make a difference, zip code to zip code, which I found out. I moved only 40 minutes south, and my last frost date actually jumped back an entire week. I was very surprised to see that. So step one, find out your last frost date for your area, and then you'll know when to start your seeds. And speaking of that, let's go inside and check out the indoor grow light setup. All right, here's my indoor setup, and yes, it is right in the middle of our kitchen. We just did not have anywhere else to put it. It was going to be too cold in the garage. We don't have a basement or spare room or anything, so sometimes you just got to make do with what you got. Luckily, my wife is forgiving, and she's going to let me keep it here in the kitchen for at least a couple months while we're starting seeds. Now, this is very simple. As you can see, it's just a plastic folding table, and on top of it, I have this little PVC rack system set up. The bulbs I'll talk more about in just a second, but these are the shop lights that I'm using. It's a pretty popular and common thing that people use for starting seeds. One thing you have to figure out is hanging these lights. A lot of people will use these wire racks, like metal racks that you have multiple shelves and you can put these lights on. I think that's a great setup. That's probably the best seed starting setup. But like I said, we just don't have the space for that. This design is nice because it is totally portable and collapsible. You can fold everything up, put it away for the season. So this is really helpful. This is a real simple design I learned from Gary over at the Rusted Garden. It's a 1-inch PVC pipe. As you can see, it's just connected here by these elbow joints. And you have a piece coming down here connected to these little T-joints and just taped on the table like that. So I think this is a great system. This is going to work just fine for me. And yeah, it's as simple as that. You could even put this little rack directly on the ground. You don't even need the table, but I do like that it gives me this little extra space. And I could even add some other lights down here and grow underneath the table. The other thing I have is this timer. This is really helpful because when you're having your lights on and off, you don't want to come and flip them off every day. So having a timer is really helpful. And the amount of light they get, what I've read is the best is 16 hours on, 8 hours off. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Now let me talk a little bit more about the lights themselves. I think it's a common misconception that you need some fancy full spectrum grow lights for starting seeds indoors. That's not necessarily the case. If you're going to start some plants and then you plan to move them outside into the sunlight to finish their growth out there, then you don't need full spectrum lights. Those lights are used for when you're growing the entire life cycle of the plant under those lights. You want it to bloom and blossom and flower and everything. Yeah, you're going to need the full spectrum of light that sunlight provides. But if you're just planting seedlings and moving them outside, you can get away with the less expensive lights. Now, that being said, it's still very important that you get the correct lights for your seedlings. There's two things to keep in mind when you're shopping for bulbs. These two things are lumens and kelvins. Lumens refers to the brightness of the bulb. Kelvin refers to the color temperature of the light that is emitted. You want a higher Kelvin. This is 6500 K, you see that? So this is what mimics daylight. This is the blue end of the light spectrum, and it mimics daylight. That's what your seedlings want. And lumens, of course, you want it nice and bright, between 2,000 to 5,000 lumens, and between 5 and 6,500 Kelvin. So keep those numbers in mind. That's what you need for your lights. If they're LED, if they're fluorescent, if they're single bulb, if they're these long shop lights, that doesn't really matter. You just need the high lumens, the high Kelvin, and your seedlings will be nice and happy. All right, so we got the grow station all set up. Next thing we need is some starting mix and some seeds. I have a really good trick on preparing the starting mix before planting your seeds. So let's do that now. Now, of course, there's a lot of different seed starting mediums and mixes that you can use. This is one that's super common and available, so this is what I'm using. And it's just a blend of peat moss, coconut coir, and vermiculite. Now, this is the thing that I learned also from Gary over at the Rusted Garden. Gary, I've learned a lot from you, so thank you so much. Is that inside this peat moss is that you'll have dormant fungus gnat eggs. So when you go to plant your seedlings and water them, they hatch, they can bite at your roots, they'll fly around, they can basically wreak havoc on your plants. So how do you get rid of those? Well, a simple trick is you sterilize this mix. And how you do that is just add boiling water. So what I'm gonna do is probably dump about half this bag into a little container like this. We're gonna add boiling water, cover it with foil or something, and that heat will kill off most of those fungus gnat eggs, and that will save you some headache. So we're gonna go ahead and do that now. So you want to just get a good ratio of mix to water. So I have just a couple inches of it here. We'll start with that. I've got a fresh kettle, nice and hot. Pour it in, mix this up. All right, so that peat moss tends to kind of clump up on the water, so it's a little tricky to figure out the exact ratio, but of course you don't want it real soupy, you know. So you just got to get a good little mix. And you know, you don't necessarily have to get it all completely wet. I think it's really more the heat that's doing the damage to those fungus gnat eggs. So you just want to get it mixed up pretty good. You see, not soaking wet, but that hot water is spread out throughout pretty good. There we go. Now, ideally we'd place a piece of foil over there because that would help keep the thermal heat in, but of course I don't have any, so I'm just going to put this lid on and hopefully that works. All right, after about 30 minutes, the soil is mostly cooled down. Still a little warm to the touch, but that's totally fine. That is ready to go. So we are gonna take some of these 6-cell trays and we're gonna get some seeds in. All right, so we got our cells ready to go. Next thing is to plant the seeds. And I can't do this part without my trusty garden helper, Wesley, my 3-year-old son. We're gonna show you what we're gonna be planting today. So several different types of kale. We have the blue curled Scotch. We have,
you tell them what.
I'll tell them that. Okay, yeah, we're also doing kohlrabi. We're doing what's referred to as dinosaur kale. This is a red Russian or ragged jack kale. And this is a really cool one called feathered frills from the M.I. Gardener. It's a fun kale. We're also doing some oregano.
Daddy, show them this.
Yep, this one next. Some thyme. Some moss curled parsley. And I showed you this already, the kohlrabi. Now this says to plant to direct sow 2 to 3 weeks before last frost, but I read that you can start it indoors much earlier than that, so we're gonna go for it. A lot of gardening is experimentation, trial and error, and that's the fun of it. So we're gonna get these seeds planted. All right, there we have it. The very first seeds of the season are in and ready. Now we're gonna be starting seeds pretty much every week from now until the last frost date. So we'll be doing more videos on seed starting, but this is the beginning. All right, that's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for watching that video, and good luck to you and your seed starting adventures. We'll catch you on the next one.